as an entrepreneur, you have to be passionate about what you do, right? You know, because if I had to sell pencils, dude, I'd be the friggin', best pencil seller, right?
For those of you who do not have a lot of money to start your business, listen in.
We'll leave some extra bottles behind.
Yeah, just in case, they want to taste it.
Okay. Welcome to Business Talk with Eric Chau, a show dedicated to startups and small businesses. This podcast explores people, ideas, events, and resources that are interesting and relevant to Main Street entrepreneurs. This show is sponsored by World Consulting Inc., the advisor on your side, helping your business go further, faster. Today, we are joined by the co-founders of Senor Sangria, the number 6 top-selling sangria brand in the country. Rick Martinez and Maria Camelo, a dynamic husband and wife team, will be sharing their journey of going from trunk to triumph, literally from selling sangria out of the back of an SUV to occupying shelf spaces in over 2,800 retail stores across the US, plus being the official sangria at the Yankee Stadium. They will also share incredible insights on the 4 pitfalls to avoid when building an alcohol brand. Whether you are a budding entrepreneur, a fan of fine wine and spirit, or just thirsty for a great story, this episode promises to leave you inspired and craving for more. So get out your wine glasses and let the sips begin. Rick and Maria, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
That was impressive, Eric.
Yeah, good intro.
A little bit of practice.
That's really impressive. I'm like, where are the words?
I like how you threw the thirst for knowledge in there. That was slick.
Well, we are. I'm getting thirstier as we speak right now. So, I think this our crew here has been anticipating your arrival for quite some time. I think since July when we started talking. Who can use a good glass of sangria, right?
It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere, absolutely. So, well, let's before we dive into it, I just wanted to, have you share a little bit with the audience who you are and maybe your journey of going from trunk to triumph. Maybe Rick, you can start first, and how you this whole beginning.
Sure.
Started.
So honestly, our journey starts before even the idea was sparked, right? My background is I started my career when I was a sophomore in college. I went to Rutgers University, right? And I was majoring in accounting, and a buddy of mine, his dad started.
You an accountant?
Yeah. Never became an accountant. Studied it.
Oh, you studied an accountant. Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, my buddy's dad started an internet company, and I fell in love with programming.
Okay.
And so daytime student became nighttime student, and full-time programmer. And eventually just fell in love with the whole internet space, and worked for my buddy's dad for a while with my buddy, and then worked for a couple of startups. But the point is that I fell in love with entrepreneurship, right? I fell in love with the challenge of taking an idea that people say, hey, you can't get done, and figuring out how to ultimately get that to market or solve that problem, right?
So the entrepreneur blood does it run in your family? You have,
I've thought about that, right? Yes and no.
Uh-huh.
My parents were born in Cuba. They left Cuba in the early 70s, right? Mm-hmm. And my dad, he went to university in Cuba. He was an accountant, right? Mm-hmm. But they never ran their own businesses, But as I've gotten older, I've kind of thought about it. And the fact that they left everything behind, right? They left with my brother, who's I think 9 or so, maybe 10 at the time, and came to a new country. Dude, they're not risk averse, right? So they took a big challenge, and I think that's inspiring, right? Even though in the back of my mind, I may not have thought of it from a business perspective. Think about it, you're starting from scratch all over, right? Mm-hmm. In a country that you don't know much about.
Yeah.
So I think there is a little bit of that kind of fueled me.
Mm. I could definitely relate because my family's immigrant from Hong Kong as well, and you're absolutely right. What could be more risky than leaving your home country and trying to start a new life and not really knowing what to expect, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe that explains why we're in business.
Yeah, absolutely.
So great. And diving into the selling sangria out of your trunk.
Yeah, so I mean that's her fault. That's Maria's fault, right?
How is that her fault?
Well,
Man,
I think we weren't married at the time, and we used to have a great group of friends. And Rick would make this sangria every time he went to a friend's house, and he didn't cook, and that was his contribution, right? He would supply the alcohol. So fitting,
people-
I can
right?
relate to that too.
Right. So we would go to all these parties, and at the time, we were both kind of in transition as to what our next career move was going to be, more so Rick than myself. And we had looked at some food franchises, which are pretty intense. It's 24/7. You always have to be there.
Yeah.
And one day we were pretty intoxicated. We were in Hoboken. We had just come from probably the neighborhood bar, and we were walking home. And I'm like, you know what? We talk about all of these different franchises. Why don't you just take the sangria that you make for parties and friends and family and just bottle it and call it Senor Sangria? We were intoxicated. It made sense at the time, It sounded like
you thought of the name
epic idea,
in like
right?
5 seconds.
I don't
That's
know.
innovative.
The thing I didn't tell her at the time, and over many years later, I think she's found out because we've been interviewed and stuff like that. I didn't like the name. I thought Senor Sangria, the first thing that came to mind was like Senor Frogs in Mexico. And I was thinking like, but now the name stuck.
Name stuck. So, that was, 2006. So it took us a little while to actually have a product on the market.
It took like about 3 years. Right?
So 2009.
R&D.
Yeah, March 20th, 2009 was our first bottling. That was our red sangria, so that started our company. Rick's recipe, which we quickly found out when we started researching how to take, something that we make at home. Like we all have family recipes, but taking those recipes and scaling them and having viable ingredients that, you can get and that are cost effective, it's a whole nother project. So Rick contacted a food lab in California. We had these bottles that we still have at our office that are these non-labeled Gatorade bottles. And Rick literally took these non-labeled Gatorade bottles and contacted some retailers in our area, one of them being the wine library. And
Gary V?
Gary V, yes, huge supporter of us early on. And he, gave us lots of advice. He sat down and actually tasted this non-labeled, strange Gatorade bottle, and just gave us his feedback. And he did at that point, I think, agree to actually sell our product when it was in a bottle. So took a huge chance on us, and he is an entrepreneur, right?
Yes.
So I think he saw the spirit and the passion. And I think anyone who meets Rick and has a conversation with him, if you're not passionate about wanting to taste our sangria, like, I don't know, maybe there's something wrong with you, because he's a passionate guy and he loves, he loves what he does, and it shows.
I think, though, one of the things, and we know it here, but as an entrepreneur, you have to be passionate about what you do, right? And I am super passionate about anything I do. If I had to sell pencils, dude, I'd be the friggin', best pencil seller, right? But you have to be passionate, and I love the underdog story of entrepreneurship, right? Whether it's us, or other small businesses, it's like everyone is up, everyone, I don't want, it's gonna sound negative, but people don't want you to succeed, right? They always think about, this risk, that risk, this other risk, right? And it's like, rather than flipping it and thinking about the positive, right?
Yeah, Rick, just to add on to that point, right? Like when you say people don't want you to succeed, I think it's more about protecting you, trying to protect you, especially people that are closest to you, right? Your family, your friends. They're like, wow, you're gonna do what? You know how risky that is, right? So I think it's coming from a good place, of those people, but they might not realize in any great ventures or any pursuits, right, involves risk.
Yep.
The greater the risk, the greater the reward, just like any investments that we do,
Yep.
right? So I'm just trying to defend.
Can I add to a little story right off of what you said?
Sure.
So we're sitting at a bar. It was myself and two other buddies, and this is back when I still lived in Hoboken, right before I sold the apartment to fund the business. And I was all in already, like mentally. I'm like, this is our business. We're going to be successful. Blah 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 blah. And but to your point, people are trying to protect you, right? So I'm sitting down with these two buddies. We've had a few drinks. And they're like, Rick, we don't know, man. We don't think this is going to be successful.
Did they give you a reason?
They thought it was a bad idea.
I thought it was a bad idea. Wow,
Selling alcohol, when is that a bad idea?
Yeah, but you think about it, especially in the alcohol space, right? Everyone thinks about big brands,
Yeah.
right? And it's so hard to break into the alcohol space.
It's still hard.
Right.
It is. I mean,
Yeah.
is it? I don't know.
Yes.
It's extremely
Okay.
hard because
Yes.
you're competing against all these big brands, right? You have big suppliers like Constellation out there, or Gallo and whatnot. They have marketing dollars, right? We didn't have that, So we had to come up with a different direction for how to be successful, in this market.
Okay. Fast forward to 2000, like first label, right? Like, what was that first few years?
There's a lot of crying.
There's a lot of crying.
Were the moments you just like, hey man, this is not working out? Like,
Yeah, it's so the first 2 years were hard in the sense that we didn't know the industry, right? And I think one of the things you asked us was like, hey, what are the challenges or whatnot? But it was hard because you were walking into stores. They didn't know who the heck we were.
Yeah.
Right. They're like, who are you? And these stores get bombarded with people always pitching them stuff. Right. And everyone's like, oh, I got the next greatest beverage. And that's what we were saying. Right.
And to add to that, these people that are coming in, these salespeople pitching new products, are from well-known distributors that these retailers are doing business with.
so at the beginning, you didn't have a distributor representation.
Correct.
All right.
And that was hard because we're here in New Jersey, right?
Yes.
And we reached out to the big distributors in New Jersey and we had an opportunity to pitch them and they said no, right? And this is we started pitching them in 2008 before the brand came out to market in 2009. The economy wasn't all that great back in 2008. And the excuse we were hearing many times was, hey, look, we're taking the marketing dollars and just investing in existing brands that we sell already, right? And at the same time, we were sitting there and they'd polish off half a bottle of our sangria. And I'm like thinking to myself, okay, well, you seem to enjoy it, right? Why aren't you getting behind it? That fueled me, going back to the whole underdog thing, right? People saying, hey, you can't be successful. That fueled me. And I'm like, all right, well, screw that. We're going to go and get our own wholesale license, right? So that's what led to us becoming our own distributor, right? And self-distributing. Right. So that's what ultimately led us to first part of the week, knocking on doors of every single liquor store we could, right? Pitching them. And then the second part of the week, like you said earlier, delivering out of the back of, the beat up Pathfinder that we had. Right. And that was unorthodox, but that's what allowed us to be different than all these other brands that are out there.
Great, Rick. You know what? I think we are segueing into our first pitfall to avoid when building an alcohol brand. So, and that is lack of understanding of the local distribution model. So continue on.
Yeah. So what we learned is, we didn't have that experience, right? We didn't have the years of networking with stores and whatnot. But what we did have is a lot of fight in us, right? So we just literally went store to store to store.
The guerrilla.
Yeah, guerrilla marketing, right? And then doing what the industry says is liquid to lips, right? Getting people that taste it. But unknowing to us, what we were also doing is building relationships, right? And these big suppliers, what it's hard for them to do is to build relationships because they're in every single liquor store, they're across all these states. That's the advantage we had. And it took us a little while to realize that, right? So at the end of the first year, we had 80 accounts under our belt and we sold about 15 to 1,800 cases, right? The second year, we ended up going from the 85 stores or so up to about 215 stores and sold 5,000 cases. And the reason why we were able to have such an aggressive growth the second year was we were building relationships that first year, right? Unbeknownst to us. I mean, we were just going in there just trying to survive, right? But that second year, because we built those relationships, we were getting referred to other stores, right? Joe Schmo store said, hey, I have a cousin that has a liquor store in such and such town. Why don't you go over there, right? And slowly but surely, that gave us a little boost, right?
Oh, okay.
And that after that second year, that did a few things. One, it gave us more confidence about the brand. Secondly, distributors started knocking on our door now, right? So it became much easier for us to be able to say, hey, let's find a distributor because they were coming to us.
Yeah, just to give a little more context to the audience, right? I mean, like according to Maria, in 2022, your company had sold over 55,000 cases of sangria. That's 660,000 bottles. I don't know what is in revenue, but you can do the math, right? So obviously, this couple has the experience of going from zero to, from trunk to triumph, in a sense. But for those who are outside of the region, really, the Northeast region, right, who might not be familiar, as I'm originally from Michigan, I'm used to going to a supermarket to get my beer, wine, liquor, basically anything you want to get, right? And all at once while you're doing your grocery shopping is very different in the Northeast. Especially in New Jersey, you can't really get those wine and spirit at the supermarket. You have to go to a liquor store. So it's much more fragmented, very, very fragmented. Okay.
Yeah.
So when Rick was talking about what you got to go like guerrilla marketing because those stores are owned by individuals or they're not owned by big corporations like Myers or Kroger's.
Yep.
So continue on.
So I think that's an advantage, or it's an advantage now, and it definitely was an advantage to us when we first started, because you can go to 100 stores, right? If you get 10 yeses, that's still 10 yeses out of 100. When you're looking at retail as far as these large chains like a Meijer or a
Whole
Kroger.
Foods.
Yeah, Whole Foods. If you get one no, that could be 100 stores or 200 stores or 300 stores. So it makes a big difference. We were fortunate that actually the market that we're still in, our largest market in New Jersey, we can have individual retailers making those decisions as opposed to a buyer that makes the decision for the entire region or possibly the entire retail. So, it's still our best market.
Yep.
So.
And then from a complexity perspective, right? We learned early on, we learned in Northeast how to sell here, right? And at the end of, or early last year, we made the pivot to say, hey, let's go towards the chains, towards the Myers and Kroger's of the world, right? But we're just, it's like starting from scratch now, right? Because the strategy changes, where before we can be very aggressive going store to store to store. Someone says no, say, hell no, we're going to go down the street. Now, it's like, ooh, this is a different kind of mindset, right? So it's almost like we're starting from scratch, which is exciting, right? Also, it's like, oh my God, it's like we're starting from scratch. We're going back to 2009 now, right? To be able to build the brand nationwide. So it's a different skill set now that we need, right? But at least we have a little bit of like history that makes it a little easier for us.
I see. That's a great. I guess it's somehow you can turn your disadvantage into your advantage.
Absolutely.
I think you have to as an entrepreneur, don't you? You have to just say, okay, well, what's the need in the market? How do I fit into that? And how can I change it to make my product more visible or more accessible to a buyer that's looking for something different?
Yeah, it's like instead of saying I don't know something, ask the question, how do I?
Yeah.
Right? So amazing. Moving to the pitfall number 2, okay? We all know that there's obviously certain capital investment with any business, right? Especially scalable business. And Maria has mentioned to me that it's actually quite expensive to start an alcohol or sangria brand, especially when you don't have much money. So for those of you who do not have a lot of money to start your business, listen in. So please get into the pitfall number 2, which is underestimating the startup costs of an alcohol brand.
Sure. So thinking back, I'm a geek, right? So I love taking ideas and breaking them down to pieces and putting them into spreadsheets, right? And so that's what we did before we started the business to make sure it's viable. And when we laid it out, it's like, oh, okay, we're going to need, it's anywhere from $200,000 to $300,000 to get the business started and moving, right? Okay. But the next question is like, okay, where do we get the money, right? And as I mentioned, we were coming out to market. We started in 2006. The economy kind of blew up in 2008.
Yeah.
It's hard to get money. So
yeah, you started your first bottle like at the
March
kind of
20th,
the mid of the financial crisis,
yes.
2008.
Absolutely,
2009,
that's absolutely right. And so it's like, how do we do this, right? And at the same time, I was very nervous to bring people on board, because it's like, okay, we haven't even proven out the brand. If we take someone else's money, they're going to want some sort of return at some point, right? And then we're on their clock versus being on our clock. But we were very fortunate that when Maria and I were dating at that time, right? She had her house, I had my apartment. So I was able to sell the apartment, and that was the seed that we needed to get the business started. So we threw into the business about 189 grand into the business, and we were able to milk that for somewhere between 5 to 6 years, right? So early on, no salary, right? I was very fortunate that I can still consult on the side, back in the business I was doing before. So no salary, and we got very savvy in how to stretch that dollar, right? And then after that, we were able to at least build the business enough where we were able to kind of get the attention of, and you've met the folks over at the statewide Hispanic Chamber here in New Jersey, and those guys are freaking awesome, Carlos and Luis, right? Yes. So we got connected with them, right?
Thank you, Carlos, for the reason why actually Rick and Maria on the show, because we actually met at your Hispanic Chamber Expo. That's
right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And they care about small business. So that's another kind of little tip along the way. It's like, hey, as you're building your business, you also have to build your network, right? And people take for granted chambers, right? There's a lot of different chambers that people can reach out to. And we were very fortunate. We connected with Carlos and Luis, and we were able to take that little nugget of cash that started our business, right? And then be able to, with their help, get access to our first loan, through small business loan, right? It was just an SBA loan. Now, I kind of skipped something earlier, right? So people who were starting their own businesses, right? You have to be savvy, right? And so there was a moment between the money that we threw into the business and getting this SBA loan where we were like gonna fall off a cliff, right? And we were very fortunate that our early distributors were very excited about our business, right? To the point where they lent us money, right? So our first...
Did you negotiate that? Or this is something they were like, hey, it looks like you need some money?
It was more, hey, it looks like you need some money, right? And part of it is they were interested in investing in our business, right? So they wanted to be able to kind of connect to us, right?
So it was more like a trial, right? For them to, hey, here's a loan.
Yeah,
see if you can
exactly right.
It benefits us both.
Yeah.
Right? So it benefits their business as well as
smart.
ours.
Yeah. So
hey, that's an advice for investors, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, if you see a business that is has potential, instead of getting equity, give them a loan first.
Yeah. Or also, if you're an entrepreneur, you could always reach out to the people you're working with, right? Possibly to be able to get a loan. So the way we looked at it is they were, they lent us money. Eventually they wanted to convert that into equity in the business, right? But we weren't ready yet for, to give up equity. So we were very fortunate that, we started off with our seed. We got this loan, it lasted for about 2 years. And then we were able to offload that loan onto an SBA loan, right? Okay. So then we didn't need to give up equity in the business, right? Okay. So, I mean, till now, right now, we own 100% of the business. We don't have any investors involved. And that's allowed us to be able to kind of slowly grow the business.
And have control.
Yeah.
Yes.
Versus trying to look at your quarterly reporting.
Yeah, and have to always be reporting to people, right? And be able to say, hey, this is what we're up to, and spending more time, keeping the investors aware of what's going on in the business and actually growing the business.
Okay, that's amazing. Actually, our next guest is a CEO of a publicly traded company.
Oh, sweet.
So that would be a good.
We'll leave some extra bottles behind.
Yeah, just in case they want to taste it.
Okay. I won't tell him yet. But if he's listening, he will know.
Awesome.
Wow, how about anything to add on the the underestimation of the startup costs? Because obviously you were the supporting partner at that time, right? In the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were fortunate. We were in a good place where we knew that if I could just keep us going with my salary because I wasn't full time in the business, then it was a good place for us. We had a very low burn, and that helped us, right? So Rick sold his apartment, which was the majority of the funding, and then we just lived pretty. We lived comfortably. It just meant that we weren't splurging. Our friends were buying houses and doing all this stuff, and we're like,
well, now you have
we
all
are
the
working
sangria
on the
you can
business.
drink at home. You don't have to go out anymore.
Or in the office. It's when you
Or
have a
in the
bad
office?
day, you're like, oh well, there's sangria.
But Maria said something that's key, that as an entrepreneur, you have to take into consideration, especially if you're following kind of our strategy, right? Where you're bootstrapping it, is, we had a low burn, right? From, the first car we had, as a delivery vehicle was our car, right? It was a 13-year-old beat up Pathfinder who had been paid off years ago, right? So our burn, God forbid if the business didn't work out, we fall on our face and we'd be okay. So that was very key, right? And the other thing that I kind of missed as we were talking is our early estimates of what we needed. Of course, they were friggin' wrong, right? Once we got out and started selling and
Was
realized,
it too low or too high?
we needed more money.
Yeah, it was too
right?
low.
Because what happened was, you get really excited, you get out there, you start marketing, you start figuring out the formula. Oh, if we do X number of events, right, our sales are going to go up. Now, if we do 3 times that, you have more aggressive growth, right? Those are things that we didn't have insight into when we first started. But, that's why all of a sudden you need to be savvy, always thinking ahead and saying, okay, well, how long do I have before we fall off the cliff from a cash flow perspective, right?
Okay. And how much of a buffer are you building?
Exactly. And originally I thought we had a buffer of, somewhere about 8. Actually, the first projection said, "Oh no, we'll be fine. We don't need any money," right?
That's just utopia thinking.
Yeah. And then it eventually became 8 years. Then it became 6, and I'm like, and we were very fortunate, that around the initial seed lasted for 5 years.
Okay.
We were very lucky, but because we did a lot of the stuff ourselves, right?
In our family. I think everyone in our family was involved at one point. So it truly was a family business in the sense that it wasn't just Rick and I.
Yeah.
We had cousins, and
My dad was
Rick's
one of the
dad,
first.
and, definitely he was a big supporter. I think once he knew, okay, they've now invested in this company and it's a go. He was all on board.
Yeah.
And
the owner of this studio, Chau, he just recently made a movie about Jeff Bezos, Bezos, The New Beginning, and it happens that I think his dad was also from Cuba.
Yes.
So maybe one day Chau will be making a movie about you and your dad.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
That'd be sweet. So I've got a little story, so I'm gonna have to throw this in there. So my dad was our first sales rep, part-time. He's retired, right? We grew up, I was born here in Hudson County in a town called West New York. And back then it was very heavy Cuban population. And there's a main drag called Burger Line.
Yes.
So my dad's like, hey, don't worry about it. I'm going to sell into, West New York and Union City. And
he probably knew everybody. He's probably the official mayor of
and he's walking down the street, saying, hey, my son, started his company, blah, blah, blah. Wow. And I had one qualification for my dad. I'm like, Dad, look, we're a small company. When you sell it into a store, they need to buy a minimum of 10 cases, which is a lot for a liquor store to start off with a brand. But that gave us an opportunity. If they brought in 10 cases, we knew they'd be willing to support our brand, right? So my dad, calls me up at the end of the first day or second day. And he's like, yeah, I sold 10 cases. I'm like, right on. I'm like, what's the store? He's like, he gave me a list of 10 stores.
Right?
So instead of selling one store 10 cases, he got 10 stores, 1 case. And I'm like, Dad, I love you, but you just made my life 10 times harder.
That's 10 stops.
Yeah,
no,
10
at
stops.
the time, Rick was delivering literally out of his Pathfinder. So that's 10 stops that he has to make now as opposed to one stop with 10 cases. So it's a big deal. It really got to a point where Rick was driving all over New Jersey.
Yeah.
And it just, we knew, I think at that point that we needed to really consider distribution as the next step, because it was time consuming. And at one point he was taking the dog as the co-pilot so that he wasn't lonely when he was driving around.
So what's the minimum order now per store? In case any,
now we don't have to deliver it.
You have
Hey, that's on them. That's a great thing that's taken care of by our distributors.
Do you want to buy one bottle? Go for it. It'd be an expensive bottle. But.
That's a really expensive bottle.
Okay. Well, that's good stuff. Tell me if I understand this distribution process correctly. So you produce the sangria, right? Your distributors place the sangria in the store, and the customer buy it from the store. Is that correct?
Correct.
Almost. There's one little thing I just want to add at the beginning. So we, unfortunately, when we started, we didn't have the money to start our own bottling facility. Right.
Okay.
So what we did develop is we created our own recipe, and we found where to source all the ingredients from.
Yes.
Right. So we do all the purchasing of the ingredients. So there's one thing to add is we actually have a co-packer, right? So the co-packer makes it for us.
Got it.
And then we move it into our own warehouse, and then from there everything's down the line the way you described it.
Cool. Okay. Thank you for the clarification. So finding the good distributors, right, who can actually place your product into the store, that's important.
Yes.
Obviously, right? Can you tell me what is the third pitfall to avoid when building the alcohol brand?
It's, and this is told to me, and I didn't believe it till I experienced it, right? But distributors are not brand builders. Right.
So basically, the mistake people make is assuming the distributor will sell for you.
Exactly.
Well, we'll do all your sales for you because they
would
do
do all
some
the sales
selling.
for you.
They are an active part of selling it. But I think it's a mistake to think that you have to take your foot off the gas as far as promoting your own product and selling your own product and being out there. So it's just as important to still be out there selling your product, even though you have a distributor that's in the market. Selling it. So
can you tell me a horror story when you had, without naming anyone, for you to realize, okay, maybe I need to be more active in actually marketing the brand?
Sure. So, I mean, we had a market many years back, and this is, again, part of the learning experience, right? You still need, like Maria said, you have to support your distributors and be in the market to show them how invested you are. And early on, there was a market in particular that, we're not in anymore, where we got a distributor. We were excited. We did the whole dog and pony show where, we cracked open bottles, sampled the staff, and then went out to market. And then we kind of disappeared. We went back, because this is many states away, and we disappeared. And
we assumed that they were going to be selling our product.
Okay.
And that didn't happen.
And it just didn't happen. And that's, so what happened was we invested his time, energy, we worked with their staff, and we got placements in stores, right? So the stores that we visited together, they brought our stuff in, but that's where it stopped. Right.
Because you guys also stopped your marketing. Your tasting and whatever.
Yeah. And we weren't actively in the market with them to support the placements they already had and bring on new placements.
I see. Yeah. Okay. So maybe not to put blame on anyone, but it's really to understand, hey, there is a process for partnership.
Exactly.
With the distributors. And don't assume they're going to do all the selling for you.
Exactly.
You got to be out there hustling just as much, if not more.
And it's not just, you have to form, we were talking about how important relationships are.
Yeah.
And it's not just forming the initial relationship with the distributor or your account manager at that distributor, it's with the sales staff as well. And so that they have a face to the brand. And I think that's such an important thing for our brand, especially because we are family owned, to have them understand the values in our brand and for us to spend some time with them. Rick does this a lot more than I've done it, and he's definitely pushing me to do this. But when we take on a new market, he will fly there, and he will do work with each of the sales staff going to retailers, so that not only the sales staff knows our name and face, and the retailer has now met someone that is behind the brand. So it's building that relationship from the top down, right? So you need to build it with the account manager, and then with the sales staff and the retailer. So it's really important to have those key relationships, so that the brand, so when you're not there, they remember your brand and they understand the values of your brand and how to sell it.
And this goes beyond just alcohol brand. This is any sort of product that you're working with distributors.
Agreed.
Right? And shame on us that, when we first started working with distributors outside of here, the Northeast, right? We made this assumption, right? Because we were doing it already without realizing it here in the Northeast, because we started from scratch, right? We're out there hustling. But we didn't realize, oh crap, we have these boots in the ground already supporting us. And we went into a new market. We didn't have those boots on the ground, right? So it was something that it was a new reality for us, for sure. And now the reality, it becomes, that's still a challenge for us, because now we're in 17, I think we have about anywhere between 15 to 17 distributors, right? So
How many states are you in right now?
We are in 12, 14 states, something like that.
Only 14 states, and you guys are already number 6?
Yeah. So
That's
what's going to happen
huge
when
potential.
you guys... We're definitely making a movie about you.
That'd be amazing, man. That'd be amazing. But hey, look, while we're throwing tips out there, right? Here's another tip for brands. It's like, we've been at this for 17 years, right? And we're only in 14 states. And keep in mind, we added 7 states last year, right? So prior to that, we were only in 7. 10. Yeah. So you need to not chase after, growth, right? Grow, deep roots, grow, in your backyard, own it before you push out.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, which is this would be a good point to kind of get into our pitfall number 4. According to Zippia, which is like a recruiting website, right? The 10 largest spirits companies in the world, right? In 2023, only 3 of the top 10 companies are based in US. Okay. And, they're controlling roughly around 22% of the global market for spirits. So, and from my conversation with both of you, I'm kind of beginning to get a sense of the values that you guys hold in terms of how you want to build your brand, right? Obviously very family oriented, close-knitted, right? So it's all about building really deep roots also where you're at, or the markets that you're in.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So share with us, what is the 4th pitfall to avoid when building an alcohol brand?
You want to lead with that, or I can talk? I love talking.
Do you remember number 4? If not, that's okay.
Go for it.
So ultimately, when building deep roots, it's very, from an entrepreneur perspective, it's very easy to chase after opportunities, right? So let's take it as an example, New Jersey, right? Take New Jersey as an example, right? We built our business in Jersey before going into New York or Massachusetts. So we owned our backyard, right? So we had a stable base before blowing up the brand in another state, right? A lot of people will chase after opportunities way wider than they're ready for, right? The example is that one state where we went out to, right? We had a distributor that we were working with, and nothing happened. We weren't ready for that, right? We were chasing, after cases, saying, "Oh yeah, we can build the business really big," but we weren't ready for it, right? So ultimately, from a building deep roots perspective, you need to focus in your backyard. You want to add to it?
Yeah, I mean, we always had that focus in New Jersey, but doing that in other states is hard, because not only do you want to have your product distributed in other states, but you want repeat customers, right? It's fine to have it on the shelf once and you can have distribution everywhere, but is that consumer going to remember your brand, and are they going to buy it consistently? So it's, and that is a lot of our marketing dollars is going towards building those deep roots, which means that we're doing tastings at stores, and we're engaging with these tasting companies and really getting them to know our brand, because now they are the face of our brand when we're not there. So it's definitely the distributor relationships, the sales relationships, but then the third part is actually having these agencies that, since we can't physically be there, be the face of our brand and promote that brand to the actual consumer that's buying the product off the shelf. So, and that's constant. That's, retraining and building different relationships in different states where we have distribution. And that's a huge part of our marketing is making sure that that consumer tastes our brand and is, a repeat customer.
And you were talking about those suppliers, right, that are really big. It's hard for them to focus very narrow. Right. Yeah. They want to be everywhere. Yeah. Right. Where we're saying, no, we need to be in this very small, narrow area, own it before we move on to the next piece. Right.
Do you think that the reason why those or distributors or retailers even they're thinking that way, because that's how alcohol brands build their business, basically go big, fast, and sell. I think that's what the last pitfall that we getting into is really the people that are in this space. They are undecided on whether to sell,
correct,
or to keep.
Yep.
And Maria and I had really good conversation on your intention, right? And just from how you guys are doing it,
yep.
building deep roots where you're at, and really continue to be the face of the company. I have a sense that from the beginning you guys are building something to want to keep.
It is. It's something that is. It's funny, man. When we first started, it's like, do we want to build something to sell, or do we want to build something that will have deep roots? And to be honest, depending on the week, sometimes I'm like, I'm done, dude. But in reality, because at the pace that we're going, we're building those deep roots to ultimately build more equity in the business for us to be able to control our destiny, right? Be able to say, hey, look, we don't want to have a regular 9-to-5 job. We want to be able to have something that can ultimately, stand the test of time, but also have opportunities for other small businesses to spin off of, right? Because now we're building our own opportunity as we go forward here.
Yeah, and I think it's all like anything can happen down the road, right? If someone writes you a blank check, basically for the company, okay, you're gonna consider it, right? But I think it's the intention that matters, right? It's correct. Like, okay, I want to put my heart and soul into building something, building a brand. That will change generations to come.
Yeah, and I think we've always really felt that we were going to build this business of the intention of keeping it. Like you said, yes, will someone come along and write us a check? Well, I think that's a decision that we would make at that point, but now we definitely run our business and build it to keep.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Rather than sell.
And it gives us a lifestyle too, right? We have a little more flexibility than we would if we had corporate jobs, right? Our office is right in the same town we live in, right? It's 5 minutes away from the kids' school, so we have a lot of flexibility where doesn't mean that we don't work our butts off, but we have a little more flexibility than we would if we had a traditional job.
That's great. That's great. Well, man, I don't know about we've been on this for like 45 minutes already.
Chatting a while.
But it feels like it just passed by.
Yes, absolutely.
I wish we had more time, but I just have maybe 2 more questions for you. I think it's important. I think it's great that both of you guys could be on the show today. I know it's not easy to run, the business of your scale, but taking time out of your schedule to come here, I really appreciate both of you. But I know that Rick has really started this business in 2006, 2009, right? And then Maria, you just recently came to the company full time, I think in 2020,
Yep,
around
in 2020.
pandemic.
Yep.
Full time,
Full-time.
as a co-founder there. And, just curious, because I'm sure there's people out there thinking, they're building the business, but, maybe one partner is not in or halfway in. What was your thought? What was that thought process like for you? How do you assess, those financial risks, right? And really most importantly, right, finding ways to work together in business, not just in life.
Yeah. So it took us a long time and I think we both thought that, I think with any family business, especially husband and wife, there's always a concern that what happens when you work together? Is it going to work? Mm-hmm. And, I think we had that thought for a while. And then, in 2020, it just got to the point where we both felt like the company, we could afford as a company to have both of us all in. And
well, they can never truly afford you, that, Maria.
I know. Priceless. See, I keep telling you.
I know.
Rehearsing what Rick has communicated.
When she came on board, she was paid more than I was.
Minor detail. I mean,
rightfully
listen,
so, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
But no, it was. I think, ultimately, we're different people.
Sure.
And we have different opinions, and we have different perspectives, but we have the same objective, right? At the end of the day, we know our goal and we know what we're working towards. So even though we disagree often, a lot often, we always come together and know that what we're working towards is the same. So whether, we go with Rick's idea or my idea, or usually it's a kind of a combination of the two ideas, it just works. And we trust each other to make decisions. And I think at the end of the day, it's actually brought us closer. I think when I didn't work for Senor Sangria full time, I'd say, well, why can't we do X, Y, and Z? And Rick was like, well, it's cost prohibitive. It's, it doesn't work. And I'm like, okay, there's
like, I work weekends now, honey. That's the busiest time for the retailers.
Yeah. So, but when I came on board, I was like, wow, I really understood the business. And I think for me, it's built a better relationship.
Probably.
Yeah. Appreciation for the mass amounts of work that Rick does. It's just like so much.
But, I mean, Greg, I have to give her credit. I mean, she did rave about that during our call. Like, man, I mean, Rick is so hardworking.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, it's true.
He does so much.
Yeah.
I mean, stuff that your spouse says behind your back, that's probably the more important than what she says in front of you.
But I think one of the key things for us is when she came on board, it was very clear what role she had in the business, right? And what roles I had in the business. So this way, and it takes a little while to kind of get the wheels moving, right? And we definitely, I definitely stepped on her toes for many times, the first couple years.
Likewise.
But her role is clear. It's, she's running the marketing side of the business, right? Mm-hmm. I'm doing, sales, operations, and the rest of the other stuff there. But, it's very clear. And yes, many times, and still now, I step into her space and she lets me know, say, hey, look, dude, stay in your own lane. And it's kind of cool. That we're able to have that kind of relationship, especially we see each other 24/7. Like we're in the same office, we're at home. It's and I'm a lot to put up with, right? But it works out. It's very I wouldn't have it any other way. It's
likewise.
It's enjoyable for sure.
Yes, it is.
Well, with all the tasting that you guys do at the store, and there's some travel around, so you get to spend some time apart.
Yeah, at least 10 minutes apart each day.
Oh boy. Wow, we are down to the last topic. Well, not topic, but really just a general question, just really for the audience. Obviously you guys have had tremendous success so far, and I think the best is yet to come. If someone, let's say, ran into you, I know you don't deliver your sangria anymore, but let's say they ran into you in a coffee shop, right? Yep. Say, oh, well, that's Senor Sangria.
It does happen, actually.
It does.
There you go. Yeah. And they just, they might be, budding entrepreneurs. Yep. They're trying to start something and, say, hey, Senor.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to take this
What's one
one.
advice
Okay, I got mine. Don't steal
we
mine.
have one each.
No.
Okay,
You can go first if you want, but don't steal mine.
What's one advice you can give me if I want to start my business?
You can start.
I think you have to obviously do some research and join organizations that you are going to that will allow you to meet other entrepreneurs and other business people. That we are part of the Hispanic Chamber. We do a lot of work with the EY entrepreneurial program, and I think just being around people who have that mindset of they're pushing their business forward, and that is their goal, and just getting advice from everybody, whether they're in your industry or not in your industry, and just finding those mentors that will give you advice. And it's actually almost better if they're not part of that business, because they're not
have the industry
jaded.
bias.
Yes, and they give you their true time and their perspective, and I think that's super key. Just finding those people that you can make a phone call to and say, hey, what would you do in this situation? And getting that advice from them. And networking. There's so many organizations that allow you to just advertise your business or, be a part of, that can be very helpful in your success.
Get on a podcast.
Get on a podcast, meet Eric at a show.
Well, you guys set a pretty high bar. Good.
So for me, like I said earlier, I'm a geek, so I think the key thing for an entrepreneur is to be able to have that vision of their business in their head that they can go ahead and process. So for me, the way I did it was through spreadsheets, right? So I had to break down and say, okay, hey, what are the moving parts for my business, right? And then once we did that, then we went through and say, okay, what's the cost of doing this, right? And then from there, it's like, for me, that's how I was able to envision saying, okay, well, shoot, we come out to business. We need to have like 10 stores. We need to be selling X, Y, and Z. Well, how do we sell that, right? You keep challenging yourself. And the more you're able to take that vision, right, and keep, kind of revisiting it and adjusting and thinking about the future and whatnot, that's what's allowed me to be successful. So when I sit down with entrepreneurs, that's what, I work with them on. It's saying, hey, how are you, if you're in the first part of your business or later half of your business, it's like, hey, what's your strategy, right? And it doesn't, we never had a formal business plan, but what we did have was projections of saying, hey, how do we sell 10 cases of sangria? Okay, now how do we sell 55,000 cases of sangria? How do we support that? What's the infrastructure we need, right? So when we first started, that spreadsheet may have been very simple. That thing has evolved over time. And it doesn't have to be a spreadsheet. It can be a piece of paper, right? But you need to be able to write down your vision, your idea, and kind of how you're going to execute it. If you can't write it down, right? In my opinion, you don't have that roadmap. And it doesn't have to be right. It's not going to be right. You're going to go back to that piece of paper and be like, crap, that didn't work out. Let me, rewrite it. Let me adjust it. But that mental practice that you're going through, trying to understand, hey, how do I take, for example, if you have a bodega, there's a lot of bodegas around here, right? And you're trying to figure out, how do I grow this? Well, shoot, how many, bags of chips do I need to sell? How many, soda or whatever it is, right? How do I get the people in the door to buy that, right? Those are all the things that you can write down and draw and lay out. Many times I find myself on an airplane, even though we have this fairly sophisticated projection spreadsheet, I'm still starting from scratch sometimes. I open up a notebook. I love seeing a plain sheet and saying, hey, how do we build our business, starting from now, going forward with everything we have going on. So in a simple word, I would say, planning, right? An entrepreneur needs to be in a position where they have a solid plan, and that plan, there is no cookie cutter template for that. You need to work to your strengths. If you don't know how to use spreadsheets, I'm sure you can get a piece of paper and a pencil and start drawing out your moving parts of your business.
And write down what you want.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. What you want out of it.
Having clarity.
Yes.
On what you want. That's one. So build your network, have clarity on your vision.
Yep.
Awesome.
Right on, man.
Wow, I think it's a wrap, and the bottles of sangria in front of me has been truly tempting, and we held off for an hour.
Yeah, we did good.
We're proud of us.
Yeah.
And we will get to enjoy your generous offering.
Right
and
We have our new sangria here. This is our apple raspberry spiked sangria. So you guys are some of the very few to be tasting this. This came off the production line on Thursday. So
this is all for you guys.
Ah.
Right here. Well, thank you so much for your time and your generosity, and
thank you.
obviously the amazing spirits you brought to the
Awesome.
show. So thank you.
Yeah,
Right on.
thank you.